Welcome to Fleet News Group podcast. I'm Caroline Falls, and today I'm speaking with Adrian Givoye, General Manager of RedBook Australia, a unit of carsales.com. We're at the Australasian Fleet Managers Association conference in Sydney, and Adrian's just given one of the most interesting talks covering residual values, something every fleet manager cares about. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you, Caroline.
Wow, you covered a lot of fascinating points. Let's start pretty much where you ended, and that's looking at rising new vehicle prices and how that's leading used car prices higher, putting fleets with end-of-lease vehicles, as I think you said, into a happy place. Can you talk to some of those points?
Sure, Caroline. Yeah, so obviously, the COVID crisis that took over the world sort of put a lot of pressure on various OEMs to obviously relook at their production capabilities and capacity and potentially adjust the vehicles that they were able to make during that period of supply shortages and components. We've also additionally seen, in line with some of those material cost pressures that came with building those cars during that period, some price rises for you and I, the end consumer. And again, that in relation to also some rationalisation that's taken place across various segments and cars and brands. We've seen average prices in general across a basket of sort of the top selling vehicles across segments rise upwards of 11% in the last sort of 3 to 4 years. And that obviously has a direct impact on the used vehicle market, as the relativity that we see between new vehicles and used vehicles has to maintain that walk for a used vehicle perspective.
Before I go on with some other sort of residual value discussion points, just fill us in, let our audience know exactly who RedBook Australia is and how you came, to join them.
Sure. So RedBook has been researching price and specification for the auto market for over 70 years now. We operate in 9 countries around the globe, and our core business is to basically study the auto market, with all the specification features that are available on new vehicles and make that available to the broader community. And it's used broadly across the car sales network to power the digital marketplaces of carsales.com.au, bikesales.com.au, and various other verticals, including boats, caravans and trucks.
And yourself, you haven't been there a real long time.
No, I have. I just joined the organisation 6 months ago now, and I've came out of the OEM space where I've sort of spent over 20 years working for a variety of sort of volume mainstream brands as well as some premium luxury ones as well.
Now, I'm always interested in my podcast to talk about things like circular economy principles and practices. And I think maybe you were alluding to them when referring to OEMs becoming more involved in vehicle life cycles and even getting into maybe buyback from fleets as they turn over their vehicles. So, what is happening? Are OEMs taking increasing responsibility for their products' lives?
I think every OEM feels that they would like to, contribute to the entire life cycle of any product they have on in their brand portfolio. And one of the things that we've seen as a shift to a new go-to-market model, being agency and various other direct customer models, is that OEMs are taking a more active role in all the ownership, so to speak, of the whole experience, including the used car trade cycling. So with OEMs taking a bigger stance in that direct to customer model, we will see the traditional practices of vehicles being traded in through independent retail channels, and I'm talking about dealers here mainly, potentially not happen as prevalently as it once did. So they will be bringing those vehicles back into a controlled, franchised environment that allows the vehicle standards, the customer experience, and ultimately the prices to be upheld to what the OEM would like it to be.
Wow, there's just so much happening in this sector at the moment. It's incredible. Another thing I'm also curious about at the moment is what's happening with insurance of EVs. And I'm wondering if EVs are, say, like double the price of a comparable ICE vehicle, but most accidents sort of occur in parking lots and, they're just sort of small dingles, like how an insurance company would price EV risk. But whether you can talk to that point or not, I'm not sure. But you mentioned some overseas experience of EVs being warehoused and difficulties in repairing batteries. So can you talk, anything about insurance and where EV premiums are at in the moment in Australia?
No, sure, Caroline. I'll comment on as much as I can. It's not like our direct wheelhouse, but certainly some observations that we've read quite widely. Mainly coming out of Europe and the US, where they're a little bit more advanced than we are in their EV journey, is that they are experiencing some more challenges around repair and what constitutes a write-off when an electric vehicle has been involved in a heavy accident I'm talking about here. So again, it's something that we're being observant of, and I think the conversations we've had locally, a colleague of mine spoke with the Insurance Australia Council, and the premiums that are being asked over a standard ICE vehicle for insurance purposes right now are not markedly higher right now, but that might be because we're still very early in our EV adoption, and again the accident experience, the incidents that we're seeing aren't on the scale that they might be experiencing in Europe or the US.
I also found your cautionary words on government policy fascinating. So you said something along the lines of that it'd be better for us to see a consistent, steady, incremental policy adjustments, and you referred to some anecdotes about how disruptive policy changes can be, for example, in New Zealand at the moment and in China late last year. Can you sort of share those anecdotes with our audience?
Yeah, sure, Caroline. Look, and certainly the stuff going on in New Zealand is a really positive thing. I think everyone's wanting to see cleaner cars on our roads, and I think New Zealand's been very progressive in their policy rollout. I suppose it's just we're talking about the speed and the depth of the policy and how quickly a marketplace can adapt to these kind of changes. And I think I drew a comparison with what went on in China, the world's biggest auto market, in last year with the government removing subsidies associated with the EVs, and the response from some of the EV brands in those markets to maintain that relativity with ICE vehicles. And so the natural way to do that was to discount the EVs, because they still have a raw material premium over ICE vehicles at present. So the only way to bridge that relativity gap and make it more attractive and attainable to buyers is to potentially reduce the price on those vehicles, and thus it creates a lot of volatility.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it? You don't know what to expect. Another thing you talked about was fleet buyers, who pretty much account for some 50% of the new vehicle market. That they not only look for fit for purpose, they also do look for residual value at the end of projected time. So say their fleet is generally about 3 years the turnover. But with EVs, it's all a bit of an unknown, isn't it? And, they're desperate for info. So, how do they project their residual values? Like, what can you tell them?
That is the $64,000 question. What are EVs worth in 3 or 4 years' time? And I think I spoke to the room earlier, and it's about, obviously, right now there really isn't an established an effective EV marketplace for used vehicles. We have one brand represented predominantly in that space, over 70% of all the vehicles being of those two models. And again, that doesn't represent, I suppose, a true marketplace for used vehicles. The price point may be above some people's affordability levels, and also the vehicle application and segments that those vehicles currently sit in may not be relevant to these second-hand buyers. So I think from an EV perspective, if we see more options come to market in different categories, and I'm talking the inclusion of 7-seat SUVs is probably one of the big obvious areas for an EV to appear, and I do know there's a couple of brands which are not far away from launching similar type of vehicles. And additionally, as I talked about, a viable dual cab ute or even a single cab ute. Once those type of vehicles come more readily available, I think we'll start to see the used market become a little bit more effective for EVs, and we can then more confidently project what their value might be in 3 or 4 years' time.
Another thing you talked about that really got my curiosity, because I haven't heard many people really articulate this point, and that is that in Australia, we're going after the bigger and bigger SUVs, bigger and bigger utes, and it's just like a real mismatch with how we're supposed to be wanting a cleaner environment and going for low emissions vehicles. We're going for these. I mean, how are we going to solve that? Nobody sort of wants to put any words to it.
No, look, Australians love a fair with the large SUV and dual cab utes and big dual cab utes now is it seems at odds and a contradiction to perhaps what's going on in the broader global outlook in terms of wanting more greener cars and the cost of living crisis. So that's a good one. I don't have the answer to it, but
I'll leave it for now. I mean, there are a lot of points I'd like to talk to about it. For example, the bigger the vehicle, the heavier the battery, and then, there are sort of cashed up older generation people that, in the consumer side at least, that are buying those vehicles. And that's a mismatch again with who's in the used car market to buy the second-hand vehicle. Like younger millennials who might be greener, there's a few problems down the road.
There's definitely from the younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Z, where we're certainly seeing a predisposition to greener powertrains, and also affordable ones at that. They don't have the means to stretch into these price brackets that are approaching on $100,000. So we need to make more affordable options available to them, and broader than just battery electric vehicles. We need other green powertrain options, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and potentially hydrogen, and a few others.
And can you offer our audience your insights and reflections on how transformative the market is at the moment? For example, how new brands that we never even considered a few years ago are making inroads into fleet, and are there any sort of like buyer beware at the moment? Particularly fleet buyer beware, because.
Yeah, look, I think COVID taught us a few lessons, and some of them not as pleasant as others. But the laws of supply and demand are universal. There was a period, obviously, where traditional fleet brands were unable to fulfil the demand, and that opened the window for obviously these challenger brands to enter the market and support these fleet businesses during a period where they needed this. So I think there were some positives from that respect, is that we got exposure to a lot of these challenger brands, and we've actually probably learnt that they're much better than perhaps people had considered. And again, I think having more options also places the marketplace more competitive, and I think that can only be a good thing, where challenger brands are bringing new models in. We've never seen so many electric vehicles come, and I'm talking, countries like China have an enormous array of electric vehicles available, and affordable ones at that. So I think it's positive that we can get more access to these more affordable options. Time will tell as to how these vehicles will hold up, but again, early signs are that it's only a positive at this stage.
Well, you just mentioned like the COVID effect on the market, and you did talk about that today and how it will have what you called a very long tail.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you would, expand on that here for us.
Yeah, so I mentioned that obviously when you have a sustained shortage in production for upwards of 2.5 years and sometimes longer in some of the brands that we're experiencing, that cannot be caught up quickly. OEMs, as much as they'd like to respond to that, that production deficit from 2 or 3 years ago, the demand keeps snowballing. So we're in a kind of this awkward situation where they'll be constantly chasing their tails. So that sustained shortage in new car production translates to a distinct and sustained dip in the used car market, because those large fleets that typically would access their vehicles and turn them over, within that 12-month cycle, haven't been able to do so, and therefore we have a bit of a shortage of young used cars, if I call that, and that will then also translate to older used cars that have availability for the marketplace. So yeah, it is going to have a long tail. I think that's what will probably assist in used cars staying a little bit more elevated for a little bit longer. And again, as new cars come into the marketplace, more options, it will even itself out with time. And again, probably good news for those people who have got a used car that they'd like to trade in. Maybe not great news for someone who's looking for a used car still.
I think I can squeeze in one more. You mentioned something about, like, a couple of years ago, everyone was just talking hybrid. And then all of a sudden, surprisingly, everyone's just talking battery electric vehicle. What happened? Are you surprised?
Look, I'm probably not surprised. I suppose I think it's the optics of it. Battery electric vehicles it's a popular theme right now globally. Again, I think Australia's probably just catching up with the rest of the world by and large, and I still think that there's an enormous relevance for hybrid, probably more so in our market. And it's great to see the acceleration in battery electric vehicle discussions and education around how viable is this for our market, and in many cases it's very viable.
The AFMA conference this year has been huge. It's really popped. There are something like 700 delegates here, and I think that part of the draw is that there's so much happening and everyone is thirsty for so much information. And thank you very much, Adrian, because I think you provided a lot of incredible material for us to think about, and what we're just also excited about as well. So thanks for your time today on our podcast.
Pleasure, Guy.
You've been listening to Fleet News Group podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet News Group. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetnewsgroup.com, where you can get all of our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.